Welcome, this is Gary Sultan, Chief of R&D and creator of IOP Technology. This presentation focuses on team diversity. One reason that you build teams is to take advantage of diversity. You want to see an issue from different perspectives. If all you wanted were more hands on the pump, a division of labor strategy is cheaper. All you have to do there is to split the job up, make assignments, and you're done. That's a lot cheaper than the meetings, discussions, and negotiations that go on in teams. However, you need clean categories to work a division of labor strategy. You can't divide up stuff until you know the dimensions of the thing you are dividing up. That's where teams come in. A group of people who look at things differently is a good way to sort out what needs to be done and then to do it. A diversity of perspectives ensures that all of the bases are covered. Diversity can mean a lot of things. Consultants make a good living creating lists of diversity categories and then preaching about their value. This is useful stuff if your goal is to stop people from picking on each other. However, knowing about diversity categories is not much help in actually constructing a particular team for a specific purpose. It turns out that traditional diversity categories do have something to contribute. They can generate a certain commonality of life experience. This is content. Systematic differences in content can be important to team effectiveness. For example, if your team is working on a perfume issue, it's probably a good idea to have some females on the team. The same logic can be applied to any of the other dimensions of diversity. While all of this is true, it is not a very difficult problem for the leader. Simple observation or a quick trip to the HR records office is all that is needed to identify team candidates that meet your content criteria. However, there is another step that any content variable must take in order to be useful to a team. It has to be processed. Think about how you go about addressing any issue. First, you have to figure out which of the millions of things that you know about might be relevant. This might be some life experience, or it might be the color of the item you're working on. In other words, you have to choose the input you will accept. This is what happens in the input box. Then you have to decide what this stuff means in terms of what you or your team is working on. For example, color might be important only in relation to a light source. Different light, different color. This kind of linking things together is what goes on in the process box. Finally, you have to decide what to do about it. Are you going to act to resolve the issue, or are you going to make a recommendation? This is what happens in the output box. Any content has to run through the three-step information processing model. It is unavoidable. The notes on the side of each box on this slide are some of the things that affect what goes on in that box. Different people choose to stress different things. When they do, the same content can come out in markedly different ways. For example, if you choose to stress detail, you will limit scope. There is no choice. There are only so many hours in the day. Dedicating them to detail means you do not have time to do a broad-range survey. Obviously, things can work in reverse. Focus on scope and you will lose detail resolution. Any content, including those in the traditional diversity categories, is affected by what happens in these three boxes, and that is what the team sees. IOP technology captures all three parts of the information processing model, input, process, and output, at the same time. It then measures them in real numbers, not just categories like big, bigger, and biggest. The real numbers are converted into a personal profile. This profile summarizes how a particular person processes information. With it, you can determine the likely approach a person will use in addressing team issues. Also note that the profile touches all of the bases in the graphic. This is personal diversity each person will bring to team issues. In other words, diversity of thought is an individual as well as a group quality. Some of us have more, some of us have less, but all of us have some. The sequence of slides you are seeing are the profiles of real people taken from the IOP database. Each profile shows a different way of approaching input, process, or output. Some people focus on detail, others on the general. Some look to immediate results, others to long-term outcomes. Some use rigorous logic, others offer spontaneous ideas. The differences go on and on. Depending on team objectives, you will want different combinations of these profiles. You don't want to cover all conceivable bases, just those that are important to the issue that you and your team is confronting. Remember, every added person adds cost. There is no magic bullet. For example, balanced profiles only mean that you are a little bit good at a lot of things. People who are very good at those things will probably think you a lightweight who misses most of the important things. All a balanced profile does is trade depth for scope. It's the leader's job to put together a team whose content and process diversity matches the issue at hand. But there is a little more to it than just picking out a variety of profiles. Each person brings a level of diversity to any issue. If you add another person, you typically increase the total diversity available. However, it is not doubled. The reason is that a portion of the two profiles will overlay each other. It is only the areas not already covered that the additional person adds diversity. Adding a third person adds even less to total diversity. The reason is simple. A large area of the potential diversity space is already covered. Only the parts not covered count as an increase in diversity. Because IOP can measure things exactly, the maximum level of diversity for a team can be calculated. Here is a slide showing that limit. No matter how many people you add, you cannot exceed these boundaries. It is possible to get to the maximum if you add enough people, but it does not happen in the real world. In over 3,800 teams currently in our database, the highest level achieved was 71% of the theoretical maximum. The reason is simple. No one is dumb enough to try. If all possible perspectives were included on a team, nothing would get done. Everyone would be perpetually busy trying to reconcile their markedly different views. Individual diversity also has its limits. This happens because individual strategic postures can be mutually exclusive. If you focus on detail, you lose scope. Since the realm of diversity includes both detail and scope, no matter which you choose, you lose the diversity of the other. This trade-off puts a cap on individual diversity. IOP technology can measure this limit. It is about 20% of the theoretical limit, the red area, and about 28% of the practical limit we actually found, the green area. Filling in the space is one of the reasons we use teams. Let's review some of the things we know. We know that transaction channel costs increase with each additional person. We also know that most firms choose team sizes in the 4 to 9 person Goldilocks zone. Further, we know that adding people increases diversity, but at a decreasing rate. Finally, we know that at some level, diversity becomes dysfunctional. That is why we never see the maximum level of diversity in the real world. What we now want to see is what level of diversity do firms actually experience when they create teams of the sizes that they do. To address this issue, we first culled the database. We only accepted teams where we knew who the leader was. This gave us confidence that the team had serious purpose and was focused on matters of material significance. We ended up with 1,196 teams. The teams were then broken down by size. The vertical scale on this slide is the percent of teams within this size group, in this case a 3-person team. The horizontal axis shows the level of diversity. We measured this by the level of increase over a single person. In other words, 100% would be a doubling of individual diversity. Finally, the midpoint or median of the distribution was plotted with a red arrow. As expected, the red arrow moves across the chart from left to right. This confirms that diversity increases as team size increases. It doesn't have to. Firms could fill teams with all of the same kinds of people. They don't. The rate of arrow movement is not rapid. As expected, each added person is contributing less diversity. The midpoint of the diversity index grows from an 84% increase over a single person in the 3-person team to a 185% increase in a 20-person team. Even with a 20-person team, firms only got about a 200% increase, or about 3 times the level of diversity, that they would get from a single person. Even if we look at the most extreme single case rather than a midpoint, the results are not impressive. The highest level of diversity registered in the 1,196 teams was 280% increase over a single person. In other words, the most extreme team offered only about 4 times the diversity of a single individual. What this real-world experience is saying is that you are not getting very much bang for the buck with larger teams. Costs rise geometrically with increasing transaction channels, and the benefits of diversity decline with each person added. With this understanding, it is no surprise that we find 83% of the teams in the real world are 12 people or less. This slide takes all of the midpoints from the individual charts and plots them onto a single graphic. The diversity advantage of the Goldilocks zone jumps out. Each added person in the Goldilocks zone adds a lot of diversity. As you increase the number of team members beyond that point, the diversity advantage decreases at an increasing rate. Does organizational rank matter? This slide says it does not. The diversity midpoint of all levels is in the same range. In other words, it does not appear that team diversity changes with the rank of the person leading the group. Whether you are the president or team lead, you will probably increase the level of diversity about 150% over that of a single individual. There is no magic to what is happening here. It is a simple cost-benefit equation. You can see this by looking at the mode of the team size distribution. The mode is the most frequently encountered team size. In our database of 3,815 teams, the mode is a 6-person team. At a 6-person team size, the number of transaction channels is rich but manageable. Each of the people on the team have to watch 15 channels in order to fully coordinate. The diversity midpoint of a 6-person team is 135% over a single person. Depending on exactly which people you put together, you also can get a nice range. On the low side, you get a 64% increase over a single person. On the high side, you can get a 193% increase. If you know what you are doing, you can make a 6-person team do a lot of different things. It appears that a 6-person team is the most frequently used size because it gives a lot of bang for the buck. Now, a 6-person team is not optimal for everything, but it does seem to work for a lot of whatever 3,815 teams in the IOP database were doing. It is probably not a bad standard for leaders to use as a touchstone when designing teams that they will be leading. This is an illustrative summary chart showing the drivers of optimal team size. The red line is the number of transaction channels at each team size. The more transaction channels, the higher the cost to both the leader and team members. The blue line is the diversity level. The actual data has been statistically fitted to smooth it out. For those statistically inclined, the R-square is 89%, so the fit is pretty good. The difference between the red cost line and the blue benefit line can be considered a net advantage. It tells you where you are buying the most diversity per unit of transaction cost. The Goldilocks zone is the area where you get the most diversity for the cost. A leader will have many teams in the course of a career. The leader's job is to create conditions for team members to succeed. The team structure is the arena in which that success or failure will be played out. This slideshow has given a framework for team structuring decisions. Understanding that there is a cost and benefit relationship is the first step. Striking the right balance between the cost and benefit will bias the team toward ultimate success. That is the leader's job. Thank you for your interest. If you want more information about IOP technology, please visit us at www.iop.com or www.oeinstitute.org. Both sites offer much more information and insight on group processes of all kinds. Thank you again.